Hi everyone and welcome back to Esther S T. I hope that you are doing very well. In today's video, we will be discussing a topic called what we have learned in marriage, and I'm very excited to be introducing my amazing husband. I will allow him to introduce himself.
Hello everyone, I am the aforementioned amazing husband. No, I'm Paul. Yes, Esther's husband. I'm hoping that you guys are all well and enjoying the videos that you've been seeing on the channel recently. Hopefully it's treating you all very well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I feel like I want this video just to be very natural, very authentic, nothing too formal, just a nice, genuine conversation about what we are learning in marriage. And I will ask you first, so be as open as you can. Of course, anything that you feel led to share, by all means, that will encourage and uplift the audience, especially those who are desiring to be married and those who are also already married. And for those of you who are married, if there's any top tips that you can give us, please list them down below because we are also learning and on a journey as well. So firstly, Paul, I would say, what are you currently learning in marriage so far?
What I'm currently learning, I feel like what I'm currently learning is something that I feel like I've always been learning about marriage, is the reality that you don't marry yourself. So sometimes people might enter into marriage thinking, oh yeah, like my spouse is going to be just like me in all of these areas. Like we're going to have the same thoughts on everything. We're going to do the same things in the same way, in the same time frame. We're going to like all the same foods and things, and we're going to dislike all the same things. No. That's not the case. The reason being, God has created us all to be individuals and unique, which means that when we bring our individuality and uniqueness to our marriage, there's going to be differences which we come across. And some differences are excellent and they're necessary and useful. Some differences are things which you then have to work through, because how one person may perceive something could be completely different to how the other spouse perceives something. You kind of learn some of the important things in terms of what one values on certain things, the value one places on something. So for a specific example, someone might place a very specific value on the time that they share together. Someone might share a very specific value on the actions that they do, how they rest together, the actions that they take. And then someone else might value, or the amount of value they place on these things might be different to what their spouse values. So then you navigate those things together over time, and as you get to learn more about one another, and as you grow in grace with one another. So I definitely say, first off, that's one thing, definitely learning.
Yeah.
You want to say another, or you want to go first?
I would say carry on.
Okay. A second thing is the reality that I feel like people who've been married for longer might attest to this, and sometimes maybe they say these things to those of us who are maybe new in marriage, or maybe you might hear some of these things from when you have like marriage counseling, is the reality that the person that you marry on the day you marry them might not be the person who you're married, who they might not still be the same exact person like 5 years into marriage, 10 years into marriage, 20, 30, 50 years into marriage. Because like many other examples in life, as we experience things, as we grow older, we change in certain capacities. So like how someone is maybe like when they're 22 years old, maybe when you're first starting a relationship, or 28 years old, or whatever the age is, by the time they get to like 30 years old, or 40 years old, or 50 years old, there'll be differences in them as a person compared to where they were at the start. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that a thing of, as we experience things, we grow in certain areas, and then what we value, how we become as people, then changes bit by bit. So there'll be elements and things which stay the same no matter what, but then there'll be things which change and grow as we become mature people, for example. So what used to interest someone who was a teenager at school, obviously doesn't necessarily then interest them when they become 20 or 30 or 40 or become adults. And the same way, certain of the things which we value now as being adults, we didn't always value when we were children, but our value proposition changes. And I think like that happens to individuals and couples within marriage as well, in terms of what some of the things that they value and how they are. Certain things change because they become more mature, or become more dependable in certain areas. So I feel like I've learned those things specifically up till now, alongside some other stuff.
Amazing. Yeah. Just to attest to that as well, like, I definitely agree. We shouldn't come into marriage with the expectation that our spouse is going to be like us. It's very easy, especially when you've been a single woman or a man for a length of time, it's very easy to assume that they are going to be exactly like you. And that's one of the things that when I started marriage and even before marriage dating, I realized that, of course, I'm learning more about my husband. Therefore, I need to adapt to how he is, his personality, characteristics, things that he likes. For example, I didn't know much about anime until I got to know my husband. Football alongside that, I wasn't a football fan, but now I'm really interested in football, but also because of the fact that I love teamwork. I love the way that they play. I love the way that they work hand in hand. So there are so many things that I've gravitated to because of my husband, but it doesn't mean that you change the person that you're married to. You have to also give grace. There are some things that may not make sense when you're in marriage, or there might be some things that you do differently to your partner, and you might be thinking, okay, well, this is how I do it, and I expect you to do it this way. So, again, constant communication is very paramount. If we don't communicate, if married couples do not communicate, then that's where potential concerns lie of I assumed. We know that assumptions aren't always healthy, but being able to communicate freely and honestly is very essential. What would you say about communication in a marriage, and do you believe this is one of the biggest contributing factors to building a healthy marriage?
I'd say that it is,
Mm.
definitely. They say that there are a couple of things which are necessary for building successful marriages, communication being one of those, in quotation marks, pillars of it. One of the things to know as well is the reality of what communication is necessary for each individual might be different, and it might be different from what the other person might be expecting. I remember we read a book, a marriage book by Miles Monroe. It was gifted to us as a wedding gift from my brother and his now wife. And I remember one of the chapters was on communication. And one of the principles that Miles Monroe spoke about is something which I think once it's said, it can make a lot of sense, but it's something where a lot of people they might not necessarily think about because they've never had to think about it before until they're married. And he spoke about the fact that communication is a tool that is used differently between men and women as a general rule. So it was a generalization because you'll find some people who are opposite of that. But as a general rule, he was alluding to the fact that more often than not, males and men tend to use communication as a tool to give information or to collect understanding about things, situations, or to give out knowledge or to decipher knowledge. Whereas women generally, they use communication as a tool to communicate like what they feel or feelings per se. And so when you say that out loud, I think most women might attest to that and agree. And I feel like most men might attest to that in terms of what men feel communication is, what women feel communication is. But we don't find that we discuss much before marriage the reality of how that then affects our relationship and how we then communicate with one another in marriage. Because then you might get an example of one of the parties is given certain information, but then it's perceived by the spouse differently to how it was intended to be. So if I can give an example off the top of my head, someone might say, one spouse might be like, oh, there's some washing up. There's stuff in the washing up that needs to be done in the sink that needs to be washed up. One party might be like, yep, that's fine, I've seen it, I'll get to it later. Whereas the person who's communicating it might be thinking like, no, there's stuff in the washing up sink, it needs to be washed up now. And so you can see how one might have a feeling as to what they're wanting, the information they're trying to communicate, but the other one is perceiving it completely different. And that's a relatively minor example, but then that principle applies to communication for major things and many things. So some might be saying, oh, let's look at this thing right now, but the other person is saying, like, I hear what you're saying, but we'll get to it at a later point. So communication is definitely a really valuable and key skill to build within marriage. And I would understand, even though we're still relatively new into our marriage, 2 and a bit years, I feel like it's something where even people who are more experienced in a marriage will attest to. It's something that continues to develop over time, and the longer you are with one another and you understand one another, those things might be brought out a little bit better. They might become a bit easier in certain facets. Other facets might become a little bit more difficult, but it's something that you navigate together as husband and wife.
I love that. And I think it also links to commitment. So again, that communication is where two people come together to discuss things that may be on one's heart, but also knowing the right time to share it. You know, I think it's important that we respect the season that our spouse is in. So if you can sense that they're not in the mood to talk, or you can tell that maybe they're not in the receiving mindset, then take the time to just pray and let the Holy Spirit lead you on when to talk about certain things, because I do believe that there are certain conversations to have at the right time. It's not that you just share what you want to share anytime. It's really important that you give honor to your partner, especially when they're tired, they've had a long day at work. Of course, there has to be some level of respect in order to cater to their needs. Coming back to commitment, I do believe that this is a big part of marriage that sometimes people can struggle with, or submission. I did a recent video, for those of you who haven't listened to it yet, about the importance of wives submitting to their husbands. So I would highly recommend you to watch it. In terms of commitment, would you say it links to submission? And for those who might be struggling with submission, what would you say? What advice would you give to them?
Commitment is both important to constantly remember and to live by. So when we get married, particularly us as believers, well, even if you're not a believer, generally the principle is marriage is a covenant. So it's like you're making a decision to be together, and then many of us listen to and hear the vows that are said as to what are the constructs of what you're committing to, in what context, like till death do us part, in sickness, in health, in richer and poorer, in good times, in bad times. Many of us might then have our own vows as to what we're wanting to commit. We've got to remember that a commitment is a decision that we're making, but we make the decision for the here and now, but we make it for the future of our lives. And it's really important to remember that, particularly when times get hard, because it can be very easy to be swayed by the situation or whatever's going on in the here and now, whatever that happens to be for a person. Sometimes someone might be going through like difficult financial struggles. They might be going through maybe like a loss of job, or unfortunately like health related issues. And it could be very easy to then think like, oh, the situation now means like, oh, I need to evaluate the decision I'd made in the past to be committed to this person. Whereas in the past, you'd made that commitment not necessarily fully knowing, but with the expectation that with God will help to sustain you, knowing that it's not going to be easy every step of the way, but that God leads you and He will enable you to continue to remain committed to your partner. So you're making a decision. So if you get married in the past, you're making a decision in the past, but at the past, it's a present time for the future of your life, as opposed to, oh, I'm making a decision for the now, and it only relates to the now, and then I'm going to review it in a couple of months, years, decades time. It's like, no, you've decided to make this commitment. You have an obligation to honor the commitment to your spouse, who is part of your life. Well, we know as believers, we have a commitment to honor it to God, because ultimately we've made the decision before God and asked Him to bless and to sanctify it and to lead us in the decision that we made. So we have a responsibility to honor God in the same way that we know that God honors His covenant that He makes to us. God has made so many covenant promises to us. How would we feel if, like, God, you promised me this, and then in the future it's like, I know I promised you this in the past, but now I'm changing that decision for whatever reason. No, we'd see that as being dishonoring. So we have to recognize that even though we understand that there are hardships and hard things in life, we have a responsibility to honor the commitment that we've made. Because most of us, we don't make it out of, we're not forced to make it. It's like we choose to make that decision. And yes, life circumstances do happen which can put a strain on the commitment and the decision that you've made. But we have to ask God for help, that He would honor the commitment that we've made, and that it goes both ways. It doesn't link directly to the question, but we must also remember when it comes to this theme of commitment, marriage involves two people. It's not a one person thing, it's two people. So both parties, both husband and wife, have to play their part in honoring the commitment that they've made to one another and to God. So both have to play their part. It's not enough for one person to be doing all the effort and showing commitment, and then the other one is like, I see that, but I'm not going to reciprocate. So,
love that. Yeah. And I also do believe, again, it links to submission, because with submission, you are technically, both parties should be honoring one another through submission. The husband submits himself to God, the wife submits herself to the husband, and God is pleased, because ultimately we want God to be pleased with our marriages. In Proverbs 18 verse 21, it says that he who finds a good wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. So again, as God refines a man, He hones a man, He prepares a man to seek the desires of his heart, which is the woman that he desires to be with. And that's why it's really important that as a man is seeking God, as a man is working alongside God, as a man is partnering with God, there is an opportunity for God to open up the way for that man to find the right woman. Sometimes people think that there's no one right person, or there's not, like, people always say, oh, is there one person for me? I personally believe that there's one person. Clearly, we are one. But some people struggle with the fact that, oh, I don't know if God has called me to be with this person. Maybe because you find it difficult to submit. And some people do find it difficult to submit in marriage. And then they question, have I done the wrong thing? So what would be your advice? Because some women find it very difficult to commit and also submit. And they have their reasons why. One of the examples I could give is the man up to the standard of loving God and serving God and honoring God? It's being able to discern, okay, when times are difficult, will the man that claims to be a leader of the home say that he's honoring God? And if he is he emulating that in the household? Because if that is the case, then of course it's going to be easier for a woman to submit to her husband. So what advice or encouragement can you give to women who might be in the season of trying to understand if I should submit? Because some women might think, should I submit to my husband in everything? Is it everything that a man or a husband says that wife should submit to? Because there might be some things that a wife may suggest to a husband that actually could benefit the family.
I think there are a couple of different things. So in terms of the theme of submission, many people in general find it very difficult to submit to someone that they don't respect, or someone who is disrespectful. So it's very important that the spouse you have, that you are able to respect them. It goes both ways. Men, you need to be someone who can, not command per se, but you demonstrate qualities to show that you can be respected. In that way, that's one way in which you will then find a spouse who is then willing to be submissive towards you. We have to also remember that the command to be submissive is not a command of one is more important than the other, one is less than the other. What it speaks to one, the order of how God has created man and woman, and the roles in which we fulfill in order to how we glorify Him. So we remember that, as we spoke about before with commitment, remember that we have a covenant with God. So our responsibility, even within our married life or unmarried life, we have a commitment and covenant with God. We have a responsibility to be right before God. And so God is instructing particularly for ladies, wives, to be submissive to their husbands, and for husbands to be submissive to God, as a part and way in which we glorify and honor God. So part of the responsibility of a wife is to submit to the husband in order to glorify God. Husbands, you are supposed to love your wives and submit yourself to God in order to glorify God. So it goes partly hand in hand. So from my understanding also, with regards to this theme of submission, it's not necessarily saying that men have all the authority and they do every decision and it's a blanket, whatever he says goes. Or vice versa, women, because unfortunately there are also times where women might want to usurp the position of leader in the home and try to forcibly take that position for themselves for various reasons. For some, it might be due to they're not receiving good leadership or any leadership at all. For some, it's they are experienced in their lives of being in that position of, I'm the one in control, I want to be the one in control, I don't want to submit to anyone, I want to be the one who's the leader and the head and do this. So sometimes we have to be very mindful of those things, but God has orchestrated it so because of how his creation order, that the men are supposed to be the heads of the household. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that it's only what they say goes. Why do we say that? Again, marriage takes two people. So both male and female, both husband and wife, have their part to play in the marriage and they build the marriage together. What it does mean, though, is that as the head of the household, ultimately, before God, you as the head of the household are responsible for the family. So if you think about it in life, let's think about it like someone owns a business. If something pretty major happens within the business, who is ultimately accountable for what has happened? It's very rarely the person who has like the lowest role or the lowest responsibility in the role. Ultimately, it comes down to the people who actually have control and authorship or authority over the organization. A lot of times that might be the CEO. It could be the director or COO or whatever the position is. Ultimately, they don't take all the actions in the business. They don't do every individual task or job in the business. But ultimately, they are the one who's accountable for the failure or success of the business or whatever situation occurs. And that kind of principle is also very similar in the family. So the male or the father or the man, they are not responsible for doing every individual task within the marriage or within the family. And it's, the men do everything and the wives sit back and only do a little. No, based on my understanding of scripture. But it is that ultimately, whatever happens within the family before God, God will ask the father, the male, as head of the household, all the actions that have been occurring within your family. Ultimately, it's the head of the house who has the accountability to God for the actions taken within the family. And I think that aspect of what it means to be head of the household is often not what is discussed, and what is often assumed is being head. It's like, oh yeah, you make all the decisions and whatever you say go. Hence why for some people who naturally they like to be in a position of leadership, particularly if it's a female, they might struggle with the theme of submission, thinking like that's all it is. Whereas in actuality, it's if there is a major decision that has to be made within the family, husband and wife work at it together. If they are completely opposed in like their thinking, but they are willing to hear the other person's points, then it means like if a decision has to be made, then ultimately that decision should then be made by the man, the head of the household. What shouldn't happen in that situation is the man presents all of his arguments or all his thoughts for something, and then his wife presents all the thoughts of it, and then he just dismisses everything. The wife says like, I'm not listening to any of that, we're just gonna do my way. No. In theory, what should happen is you take on board the views and the opinions and the perspectives of your wife, and then with that information and your own, even though they might be differing, you then use that to hopefully make an informed decision as to what is best, not for yourself, but for the family. So an example might be, simple example, it could be like something like an opportunity to move move home, to sell your house and to move to a completely different area. one might have pros for it, one might be against it. What shouldn't happen is like you blanket just dismiss the viewpoint of your spouse both ways, but it should be you reason together, and then you come up with the decision. And then if a decision has to be made, then it should be that the man, as the head of the household, should then make a decision with the best interest of the family unit, not for the best interest of themselves only. I feel like if that stuff kind of happens, it makes it a little bit easier for women to be submissive onto their to their husbands, if they feel like they are part of the marriage and not just a tag along member, if that kind of makes sense. And ultimately, all of these things are in our walk and service unto God. So we submit, wives, submit unto your husbands as unto the Lord. Husbands, love your wives as unto the Lord. Respect your husband. Respect goes both ways. But you do all of these things in lockstep with your walk with God. And one final thing, which I didn't mention before, but it's a kind of key, is the reality that the command to do this is not based on whether you respect the person per se, or you agree with everything that they do or don't do. It's actually, you're doing this because this is how you're being obedient to the Lord. So it isn't like, I don't like my husband because last week he did this thing to me, so I'm not going to respect him and I'm not going to submit to him in his decision making or things like that. It shouldn't be like that, but it should be like we submit to them, not because they are necessarily any better than you in certain aspects or certain areas as well. It could be like you, for example, the wife might be more akin and more financially astute than the husband. That doesn't then mean that the husband makes all the financial decisions for the family. No. It could be like in that area, the expertise are deferred to the wife to make the plans, but then you submit those decisions again to the husband, and then as a team, you make decisions going forward. So it isn't that, the man's head of the household, it means that he's the best at everything in every area of the family, and it's his decision over everything. Mine doesn't matter as wife. No, not at all.
Wow, that's good. That's good. And I also do believe it shows honor, love, and respect. Even when a man can listen to his wife about certain situations or maybe decisions that may come up that maybe the husband may not have thought of. So it's really important, again, just to have that open-mindedness. Lastly, I also wanted to emphasize on the importance of prayer, because without prayer, you don't know what you're doing. Prayer is the indicator and the director of your life. Whether you're praying collectively, whether you're praying individually, prayer is ultimately the lifeblood of a marriage. It's what sustains a marriage. And we know how powerful prayer is. It's not to say that we have to pray for long hours or 3 hours straight. Just words that bring life and meaning into each other is so important, because there will be times where it does feel challenging, and the most kindest thing that you can say is, can I pray for you? Is there anything that you would like me to pray for? What's on your mind? Let's share. So what advice can you give to couples who perhaps they see prayer as a last resort rather than it being, this is what you need to do in order to sustain your marriage? Because prayer is the ultimate key to sustaining a healthy and successful marriage.
It is. The reason being is that even if someone is unmarried, being connected to God and being close to Him sustains us in life in general. So whether we are single or whether we are married, therefore it's important. Some might argue it becomes even more important when you're married, because then you have others that you are accountable to and accountable for. So then some might say it becomes even more prevalent to remain in prayer both individually and as a family unit. One of the things that I'm always reminded of is, one of my favorite scriptures is John 17:17. And it says, Jesus is praying and he says, sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. So it's very important, like even within our own individual life, but then within married life, that things that are true are what is being shared, but also then allowing God's word to sanctify our hearts and sanctify our lives. He does that for us individually, and therefore, because we are now a couple, and two become one.
Mm.
You want the same thing to happen, in that you want His word to be sanctifying us as a married couple as well. So
yeah, love that. Love that. Wow, thank you so much, hubby. You have been such an instrumental pillar, and I really hope that this video has encouraged you. And I really do pray that it will bless your marriage. And for those who are designed to be married, I do hope that there's something that you can pick out of it and apply to your own walk until, of course, the day comes where you say, I do. Is there anything else that you would like to contribute and give to the audience?
Thank you guys for listening. We hope that this video reaches you well and the message. We really hope that you, wherever you are in your faith journey and in your journey for singlehood or singleness or to be married, that the Lord will bless you and keep you, and that He will guide you. We pray that ultimately, whether you're single or whether you're married, remember that your responsibility and your obligations are ultimately to the Lord. And so if He is the forefront of your thoughts and your heart, He will provide for you the things which He knows that you need and that He knows that you desire. And so for many of you who might be watching this video, there will come a time where you will be married and that you give God glory for. For some of you who are already married, may some of these words hopefully treat you well. We look forward to hearing from words of wisdom from yourself also that can be applied to us. Again, we are still relatively new into marriage compared to others, but we've also experienced a few years of marriage, and so the Lord has been leading us. And so we seek His wisdom, and may you continue to seek wisdom as well. And hopefully the things which we've shared for you guys today will help you in your wisdom journey also by God's grace.
Amen. Wow, thank you so much, babe. And thank you all for listening. Before we go, we want to also mention that we have written our 8th book, The Cost of Intentional Marriage. And we are currently doing a monthly book series about each chapter. So my husband and I will be talking about investing in your marriage on Thursday, the 19th of February. It would be amazing if you can join us. So I will leave all the information down in the description bar below. But we do want this book to encourage you, because indeed it does focus on developing a deeper understanding of purposeful matrimony. So we want this book to encourage you, for those who are single, for those who are in the courting phase, the engagement phase, and of course the married phase. We want you to be inspired and blessed by our book. So if you haven't got your copy, please do visit the authenticworth.com website/books for a signed copy. But other than that, we just want to say thank you so much for listening to this video. And again, as my husband said, if there's any other topics or anything that you believe will benefit us, we would really appreciate you leaving them in the comment section below. And if you would like to see my husband and I next time, make sure you like this video and subscribe and share with a friend who also may need this video for encouragement. Thanks very much, guys. Until next time, we look forward to catching up with you later.
Take care. God
Take
bless.
care. God bless. Bye.